All right. Sherry, let me know when you're ready. All right. We'll call the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Here.
Yang,
Here.
Jalali,
Here.
Naker,
Here.
Prince,
Here.
Tao,
Here.
Council President Brenmon.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
All right, I'm going to try this today. Please stand and join Councilmember Tolbert as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent
Thank you.
agenda items 3 through 13 are before you for your consideration.
Let's see, item number 11 for Veterans Day on November 11th appropriately will be taken for separate consideration. Is there anything else that should be taken separately today? All right, seeing none, Ms. Naker moves the balance of the consent agenda. Any discussion? Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted as amended. Item 11, Resolution 21-1600, honoring St. Paul veterans on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2021.
All right, and I believe we have, this is something that Ms. Prince has brought to us several years in a row. Do you want to start off and turn things over to Ms. Newborn, or should I start with Ms.
I
Newborn?
am happy to do that.
Ms. Prince.
Thank you so much, Council President Brenmon. As we all know, next Thursday, November 11th, is Veterans Day, and it's an opportunity to recognize all the people who have served our country. When I think about veterans, I think about my own dad, who served in the Pacific in the infantry in World War II. But there are so many veterans among us. We have people who are working for our city who are military veterans or military and active military service. And I think it's important that we recognize them every year. It also comes to mind how, especially at a few local events recently, both Indigenous Peoples Day, and also in the SUNY Lee Parade, that we were able to see our Hmong veterans who were participating in these very important events in our city, and how unselfish their service was, and how completely it changed their lives and the lives of their families. So it's very special today to be able to honor these veterans. So with that, I will read the resolution, and then I will turn it over to Ms. Newborn to say a few words on behalf of our Human Resources Department, and the fact that we have a veterans employee resource network that has brought this forward each year. Let me find my resolution. Oops, here it is. Resolution honoring St. Paul veterans on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2021. Whereas the St. Paul City Council recognizes with great respect those who defend our rights and freedom. And whereas the people of St. Paul recently exercised our right to vote, thanks to those who heroically served our nation to secure those rights. And whereas we pause to recognize those who made the ultimate sacrifice after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, and whereas the City of St. Paul has veteran employees and family members who continue to serve our nation with honor and distinction, and whereas the City of St. Paul recognizes the ongoing work to ensure the inclusion and acceptance of our veterans as part of an equitable city vision. And whereas the City of St. Paul established the Veteran Employee Resource Network to recognize and support the incredible contributions of our veterans. And whereas the City of St. Paul appreciates the families, friends, agencies, and employers who support our veterans through this great city, and therefore be it resolved that the City of St. Paul publicly honors all veterans for their dedication, sacrifice, and service on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2021. And as I introduce Ms. Newborn, I just want to also thank Brian Balfance, who is a veteran and an employee of our police department, who has helped us in putting this resolution together each year. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Newborn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Councilmember Prince. You took all the words out of my mouth. Thanking Brian Belfont for his leadership on the Employee Resource Network, VERN, the Veterans Employees Resource Network. And it's just been really great to have employee resource networks such as VERN and our other networks to be able to push and drive and work with you all on putting together these resolutions, but to have that presence within the city and in a place where those individuals and our staff can convene and can talk about and take on leadership roles within the city and advocating for their respective networks. So I really am appreciative of the work of Brian Belfont and appreciate the council for recognizing and passing this resolution to recognize Veterans Day.
Thank you, Director Newborn. Would put you in a tough spot after we read the resolution and make comments. I would just like to add today, while Ms. Prince was talking and reading the resolution, I was thinking about my own grandfather who had a service picture, a colorized service picture, that where they, it was a black and white picture, but they had added some color to it. And it always fascinated me. First of all, he looked so young in the picture. I suppose at the time he was like 20 or 30 years older than the picture, but I thought it was like, who's that guy? I barely recognize him. But I bring it up just because we would ask him about his service to the country, and he wouldn't talk about it. And I don't know anything. And I don't think we really did as a family anything about his time in the service. And I really wish that he would have had an opportunity to be in network with other veterans and to be able to work through, if it's trauma or just his experiences, or feel like he had that community around him. And I think that he did participate in some civic organizations in his town, but he was a small town guy from North Dakota, lived in northern Minnesota. And I just think it's really nice for our veterans to have community around them and to have it facilitated here in the city. So I appreciate being able to lift this up, and I'm thinking of my grandfather today. Other comments before we take Ms. Prince's motion? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker. Aye. Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted.
Mr. Tolbert moves suspension of the rules. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenman.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. Rules are suspended. And we have an update on the rent stabilization ordinance.
All right, we have an invitation we sent out today on the rent stabilization ordinance. We got an email this morning with information, information which we had asked about last week, a web page that was published, and just a lot of questions. And so it looks, Ms. Goodman, I see that you're the tribute. Welcome to our council meeting today. We would love an update following last night's vote. There's a lot of confusion, particularly around our start date and effective date for the rent control ordinance. So any light you can shed on that for us, and then if you could stand for questions, we'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Council President and council members. As you know, just last night, the voters passed a ballot initiative resulting in a rent stabilization ordinance for St. Paul. It's been less than 24 hours, so we are working to determine next steps, but I can provide a bit of an update today. In regard to effective date, by charter, when a ballot measure passes, the ordinance is effective immediately. But the language in this ordinance includes a May 1st, 2022 effective date. From a practical standpoint, again, the ordinance passed last night. We don't yet have the infrastructure in place to enforce the ordinance immediately, which may have been contemplated in the inclusion of a May 1st, 2022 effective date. So there is still a bit of question and confusion about it, but I will just give you those two things. What I know today is that the ordinance itself is effective immediately by charter, but the ordinance does include an effective date. So that's where we are on that. In further update, we do need equity in housing. We do need more housing supply. We don't want our equity goals to be at odds with our growth goals. And as the mayor kind of pointed out, the ordinance as written may actually put those goals at odds. I've received many calls from developers of projects currently in the pipeline, which would bring hundreds of units of new housing supply. And many of those development projects today now are on hold and at risk. And that loss of new housing supply would have a negative impact on overall housing affordability. So we need to look carefully at that. Fortunately, we already had released an RFP for the study of various possible tools and policies toward anti-displacement and housing affordability, including inclusionary zoning, as well as rent stabilization. The scope of the RFP included a study of the financial and market feasibility of such tools within the St. Paul housing market specifically. So I'll say that very often, rent stabilization ordinances do not apply to new construction, so as not to disrupt the supply of new housing, as adding to the housing supply is a critical lever in sort of the overall housing affordability. For the study, we received 2 excellent proposals last Wednesday, and we should have a consultant on board very soon, as quickly as the city process for getting a consultant on board can go. That work will help to inform the implementation of the ordinance. We need to build a table around the conversation to discuss how to balance those goals of both equity and growth. And we'll be inviting stakeholders and stakeholder groups, starting with City Council, to earnestly participate in a conversation that doesn't pit renters against landlords, doesn't pit growth against equity and affordability. I haven't been here for all of this, but in St. Paul, we've proven that we can bring sort of different viewpoints and interests together to develop a quality minimum wage policy, a community first public safety framework. We very much expect that when we get stakeholders around the table to work through the details of this ordinance, that we'll find our city capable of advancing our housing growth and equity goals at the same time in a way that best meets the needs of St. Paul. So again, it passed last night. I don't have much more to provide today. We'll continue to bring updates, and I will do my best to answer questions that you have today. But that's really all I have for you at this quick turnaround time. But I'm here for questions if there are those that I can answer.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Goodman. I think part of the quick turnaround time and why we brought this in under suspension is because we received an email this morning and a web page was launched that indicated this was effective immediately. We asked for this information last week. We were given nothing but vague answers. And what you just said to us today probably could have been presented last week. So the quick turnaround really was something we've been asking for quite a significant amount of time. So I appreciate that you're here and we'll attempt to answer questions that we have, but
Mhm.
this should not be coming as any surprise. I think this morning at our budget committee meeting, we said we asked these questions because we wanted to be sure that as our voters went to the polls, that they had information, not nothing. Obviously, our role as a city is to provide information, and we're told we don't have any. So I know we've had questions about budgeting, about process, about, and so on. And there may be some of these that come up here today because we are public servants. There is a vote that took place and we need to carry out the wishes of our community. And we need the tools and the information to do that properly, especially that we're in the middle of our 2022 budget season. So I think I see Mr. Tao has a hand up. I'll yield to him for questions. But there's quite a bit of frustration, I think, this morning receiving an email that answered seemingly questions that we've been asking for a month and is now taken down from the website. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Director Goodman, for being here and trying to explain this to us. I guess I'm still not clear on this. It's effective immediately, but then it's effective, you say, sometime in May, right? And so that creates, I'm confused about that. And then just that gap, does that open us up to any legal exposure? This is just experience that we have with the tenant protections and different things like that. And then the second part of that is who's funding this? Where's this money coming from? We already passed a levy. Is this coming from the ARP money? What's going on?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Council Member. I had similar questions this morning about the effective date in the website. I learned that the website was something that was a working web page that actually shouldn't have been published. It had some confusing language in it. I think it's still there, but without as much information. In looking into that today is when I learned that the ballot measure by charter it's the ordinance that's effective immediately. And in this case, the ordinance has an effective date listed in it. So I learned that through my own questions about the confusion that was provided on the webpage that was published erroneously.
So what I want to clarify is that it's effective immediately, but it doesn't kick in or affect in the next year. So let's say that I'm a landlord and I'm in the middle of renegotiating my lease with the tenant. Can I increase it 5% because it doesn't affect until next year, or like what is my legal obligation? And then again, do we have any exposure to the city?
Council President, Councilmember Tao, I believe that we're still working with CAO to determine the answers to those questions. I do not have an answer to that, the solid answer to that question. I've given you the information I do have at this time.
And Mr. Tao, just underlining another question that you asked, when a couple of years back we had an outstanding legal question about our trash hauling service. We planned accordingly and added a budget in our levy limit to accommodate any potential costs.
Mm-hmm.
There is a ballot initiative that was in play that the administration or the mayor supported, but we do not have that contingency built into our levy. So are we anticipating a budget that will need to come out of the 2020 budget that we have already set the levy for, or is this something that will be amending mid-year, or what are we doing? Because at this point, we don't have, we were not anticipating that there would be these costs when we set our levy limit.
Council President, that's an excellent question. The work that has been done has been looking at sort of an environmental scan of other cities, rent control or rent stabilization ordinances and how they've been implemented and what they involve. What's the sort of like what's the administrative burden? Kind of trying to come up with an order of magnitude number, which we don't really have yet. So just given the timing in my head, it's potentially likely that maybe it's something that an amendment has to come for after the budget is adopted. But just solely because we've still got to determine what is the lift, right? What does it look like what is the mechanism? What are the logistics? Looking through each piece of the ordinance and imagining as a landlord, how do you if there's an exemption or if there's a tenant who has an issue, there's an administrative lift involved in this. And I don't think that it's been quantified. We've not had the opportunity to quantify it completely yet.
Thank you. And to be clear, the budget question was Mr. Tao's. I'm just, this is not a surprise. The language was set and established for us. We passed the language many months ago, so that we've done none of this work is shocking to me. Ms. Naker has a hand up. Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Thanks, Council President. Thanks, Director Goodman. I think that the questions that you're hearing us asking are just the same questions that we're hearing from our constituents. And I know there are just a lot of questions this morning, no matter what side of the issue that you were on. When I received the email from Munir this morning, it contained a link to the webpage, and it also said this is where you would go to get your questions answered about the ballot measure and the ordinance, which I actually was happy to see that come out so quickly because I think people do have a lot of questions, and I was happy to be able to direct people somewhere. I apologize for my light. I can't seem to move somewhere in this room that I'm not awkwardly lit, so you're just going to have to take the strobe effect. So I am now, that website does appear to have been taken down, and I'm wondering, first of all, what was up with that? And second of all, where do people go if they have questions? I think even if the answer is we don't know that yet, it's really important for us to have a department identified, whether that's OFE or whether that's PED, a contact number. And then I understand that we don't yet know the fiscal impact, but I am wondering, when will we know when we will know? Because we are getting extremely down to the wire in our budget process, and a lot of the changes that we are talking about making to the budget depend on having that denominator and knowing how much we're going to need in terms of staffing. So I would appreciate any kind of clarity on that front.
Council President Brimo and Council Member Naker, the website is, we definitely, if there's not a contact person, or I haven't had a chance to look at it since I know that it's been changed. It's regrettable that the web page went up with information this morning and that was confusing and not clear. And we will ensure that at the very least there's a contact information. I believe that questions will largely come through OFE, but we in PED, as we're able, will answer questions or certainly do our best we will certainly respond in some way to questions and make sure that questions get answered. In regard to the number, again, I haven't had a chance to talk to Director McCarthy yet today, or others who have been kind of working on that number. I just looked at the calendar though, and thinking about your budget process and knowing I haven't been deeply involved in the work yet in trying to determine the kind of costs involved in the implementation of this. So we may have to get back with you on kind of a timeline on that number, but I appreciate the urgency in knowing and that we're in the middle of coming to the end of the budget process, and I appreciate that you need more information there.
Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President Brenmon, and thank you, Ms. Goodman. I'm sorry you have to take the brunt of all this, because I feel like Mr. Karcher Ramos, the deputy mayor, and the city attorney are probably more appropriate places for these questions to be addressed. But thank you for being here. I think one of the problems, to Ms. Naker's point, with the information that went up online right away this morning from Mr. Carter Ramos was not the least bit confusing. They were really, really definitive answers that it takes, that it, you know, that the effective date was very clearly stated there. I think it's interesting that you are coming back to us and saying that whatever informed those direct answers is apparently still in play. I just, to Council President Brenmoen's point, it is really, really deeply troubling that we've had this ordinance available to us, the language, including back when we were setting the maximum levy, and the administration should have been thinking about it. I will say, do we have a number? Does anybody know how many landlords we have in St. Paul? Is that a number that anyone knows? I believe we have 70,000 rental units, but I think the administrative lift here is that all of our landlords who believe that 3% will not give them a reasonable return on their investment will be able to appeal to the city on the very vague, subjective notion of what a reasonable return on investment looks like. So this has been written in a way as to create a bureaucratic nightmare. It's not too strong of a statement. And I will also say that, you know, it was told to me by lawyers who drafted this ordinance that they followed the wisdom of the study done by the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs. But the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs study has a lot of really, really helpful information in it that I believe would not have led us to drafting the ordinance in this way. And just to give people some sense of another city's experience with administering the program, in the Cura study, the city of Oakland, which of course is larger than we are, but the city of Oakland has a staff of 26 people. And this is, to me, is really interesting. They charge $101 a year as an administrative fee on each and every rental unit in the city. And 50% of that can be charged back to the tenant. So you know, when we're talking about this being, that we are passing something that is going to be helpful to our low-income tenants, I just want to point out that this is going to cost a lot of money. And then further, like my colleagues and like you, Ms. Goodman, I have been hearing from people so far today, including a project in my ward that was about to close next Friday. And I have notified you that everything's up in the air now for that. And it was a local developer, a local lender, and the lender is, I won't go into details, but an actual, difference in what the project is going to cost right now, just out of the box. So we are dealing with something that the unknowns are tremendous in the impact on our tenants. I also heard from a landlord today who said, I like to be able to sort of figure out where my tenants are and how I, is this a time to do a rent increase? What are the issues? He said, I'll have no choice now but to do a 3% increase every year. And if you look at that and how that compounds for a low income tenant, that is a significant increase. So I just need to get these things out. And I know, Ms. Goodman, that you're well aware of what a tremendous impact this is going to have on both our ability to expand our number of units and also to serve low income tenants.
And Ms. Prince, I appreciate that. And I do want to just try to just, I really want to keep our conversation at this point focused on what is the city doing? I mean, this has passed, and there are many of the concerns that you brought up that are very real, serious issues that are facing us right now. And I think that the council has been asking for several weeks now, the budget or the amendment language or the referendum language was in front of us for months. And there's literally no information except for 12 hours after the results were posted, a website went up. So it just feels like there's a real disconnect here, and we're deep. I mean, one of the things that our council has been, fairly united around is trying to find ways to reduce our levy. And just a reminder that for example, Oakland is an $8 million program, taking it down to a $6 million program to match our population, that's 4 levy percentage points to cover that. So we're talking about real money here. And so we're trying to understand who is working on this and when we are going to get an update, because we're passing the 2020 budget in about 1 month. Ms. Yang and Mr. Tolbert.
Thank you. Director Goodman, can you clarify who the point person for us would be moving forward if we do have questions? I think you mentioned earlier really briefly that that's changed, so I want to make sure I know who that is. And I also am really interested in finding out what kind of interaction or collaboration will happen with council members too, because I have had conversations with tenants in my ward who, ever since having a conversation with them maybe about 3 months ago, I found out a month ago not that now they have been displaced, and so their rent has it increased $400 just instantly. So that was the cause of the displacement for them. And I feel it's really important to have these lived experiences be uplifted within the process that is created, and that it's most equitable, and that it continues to center the people who are most hurt by the housing crisis and the price gouging that happens. And so I have a very a direct interest in doing that and would like to be really involved in that process.
Council President Brimlin, Councilmember Yang, there are many departments working on it. I do believe that ultimately the program will likely be administered through OFE, but there is, again, from the PED side, we had already begun the process of a study. In my opinion, like the study really needs to inform and ideally would have informed an ordinance. And we've moved forward on, we have 2 great proposals, and so that's what PED's been doing. And I know OFS has been working, I think, probably on the budget piece, and OFE has done some research and had working groups. So we've all been working a little bit on different pieces, and now we're coming together now that the ordinance ballot initiative has passed. And I will be more involved than I have been, I think, and we'll coordinate that beginning today. So, and again, apologies for the confusion, and it's regrettable that communications went out that were not clear.
So to Ms. Yang's initial question, are you the new point person?
Council President Brimlin, I don't believe so, but I'm just here to provide the update today.
Okay,
but
because I know we did, Ms. Yang, earlier today, we did discuss this at budget, and we did invite Mr. Carter Ramos, the deputy mayor, and OFS. So they sent Ms. Goodman. So that thing's a legitimate.
I'll let me clarify that I don't know that for certain, but if I'm, it's it's possible that I will be. So we will keep you updated on the process and who your contact person will be.
Okay, that's great. And I do think in order for us to understand who to ask the questions and how we are going to be engaged and involved, that will be good for us to know. Mr. Tolbert has a hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that was a perfect segue to my group of questions. or maybe comments at this point. I think we all have understand that something that passed, less than 24 hours ago. It's going to take some time to plan on that. However, the website was emailed out with some definitive answers. I think the final results weren't in until about 11:30 p.m. I was pressing refresh a lot on the Secretary of State's website, but polls closed at 8. So within about 12, 13 hours of polls closing, the website was sent out, which I think, makes us think, well, work has been being done, and we know work is done, because I actually believe that about a month ago during the follow-up with the HRA housing unit, we asked, if this ordinance goes into place, are we going to use, where are we going to use the resources to staff it, to do the rulemaking, to create the things that are necessary of it. And at that time, we were told there was a working group that was happening and we'd have answers in the near future. We've asked about that multiple times, including last week when we sent emails requesting that a briefing happen. I know my office sent direct emails to OFE with specific answers that they replied, "We've received your questions," and that's the extent of the response. So kind of just wondering more, as Council President Bramwell said, this is, passed by the voters, and that is what it is. We all have our opinions on it. But at this point, we have to implement something. And that implementation group has been meeting, my understanding is, for at least a month. This council seems to be completely in the dark on what they've been meeting on, what they've been talking about, what direction they're taking. And it sounds like you have not been particularly involved in that group. Is there somebody from the administration, because this is the administration has to implement, that's part of their duty, and the mayor is responsible for that. Can we get answers from somebody actually that has been involved in that, or can at least give us a timeline when answers are expected? Last week we were told, I believe the response was, we won't have those answers for a while. But obviously there is significant work going on that just, who knows when it will be announced at this point, based on how that website was announced with very definitive answers. What could you give us some direction on? Can we expect answers, a full report of whoever the lead of this is? I don't know if it's OFE, which reports to OFS and the deputy mayor, or like you said, it doesn't sound like PED is the lead on it or is likely not going to be. When can we actually get answers? Because I do think it is important that we're moving on this, and actually we need to put in our budget. We're passing a budget in about a month and 2 weeks, a month and a half. We're legally obligated to pass that, and so this is an important knowledge to have. Have your counterparts told you when they will actually have answers for us?
Council President Brimwell and Councilmember Tolbert, I do not have answers. I cannot speak for OFE's timeline if they've been requested. I was not privy to the. I did not know that there were questions that were unanswered from OFE. Like, I just haven't been involved in that conversation. So I don't know that anyone's here from OFE, and I don't know the answer to your question regarding their response time. I apologize.
Okay. Can we make them available? Are you able to contact them and see if they can come on and shed some light on what has been going on for the past month of this planning?
I can do my best. Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tolbert, I can try to reach someone and see if they're able to join us today.
As I mentioned earlier, there is an invitation link to Mr. Carter Ramos, the deputy mayor, and Mr. McCarthy. So anybody who is paying attention, who can join us and answer those questions, we would appreciate it. In the meantime, I see Ms. Jalali has a hand up.
All right. Well, thank you, Director Goodman, for appearing here today. I've been working to track this conversation. There's just a lot of topics being brought up. I think one point that I'd like to make that might seem minor, but I think it's important, is that when I looked at the page that went up today, it appeared to me that it simply stated, here's the ordinance that passed as appeared on the ballot. Here's a point of contact information. Here are some FAQ about it. And it seems to me like the most concerning part that has been a tricky communication point is the effective date. And I think that it's important to just point out and acknowledge that the legal analysis that we have is that the effective date is immediately, and then that the ordinance itself then, which is the effective ordinance, says that means it's this time. I think that that's, I'm not a lawyer, but I work really hard to follow the advice of our city attorneys. I work really hard to have just a reasonable understanding of what is happening as an everyday person and policies are meant for. So I just think it's important that we take a breath and kind of model like reasonable willingness to just embrace uncertainty and say, I think that it is possible the website was posted and said effective immediately and just maybe didn't do the best job explaining that complexity, but also it's new legal territory. And so it just needs to get worked out. And I think that in governance, we have to be willing to model figuring new things out. We often expect change, especially landmark change that made national news in our case and became the first of its kind policy in the Midwest, if not nationally, to be immediately figured out overnight. I do want to say, I hear what council members are sharing, that of course we know it's not going to all be overnight, but I also just, I think that there's a possibility that some communication went out today that is kind of hitting the wrong way, but didn't actually say what people feel like it said, and that I could see it being interpreted either way. I think what we owe the voters and our community and stakeholders is the best clarification we can offer right now. And I just tried to articulate what the best clarification I feel we can offer right now is. So I simply want to offer that in terms of this is a public meeting. Our community is watching. This election is fresh. I'm really doing my best here to navigate this well with everyone because we're now in this boat together. And I also want to just point out, I can't tell if my colleagues are saying no work has happened or not enough has happened or which it is, but I think that the most accurate accounting we can make is that some work has happened, both specific to this policy and in ways that are comparable, even though they happened before this policy. When we passed the Safe Housing Agenda, we had an entire tenant protections implementation committee that the Office of Financial Empowerment built and put together. So many of those stakeholders are the exact same ones or representative of the type of broad array of stakeholders we'd want to be talking about a policy like this one. That effort and those structures haven't gone away. All of those people are still here. We had a sense of a budget to implement an ordinance that safe housing would have applied to every single landlord in the community, would have applied to all renters. The scale of it is comparable. The policy is different, but the scale is very comparable. I think that's important. It doesn't mean we can sit here and say, here's the exact number we're talking about. But I also don't think it's true to say, we just have no idea and we've never done any work on this and no work has happened. So I say this because as someone who very much wants to do the work to figure out what's ahead, I think it's important that we acknowledge that we are both in new territory and we do get to build on some of the work that has been done that I think can inform this. We have relationships that can inform this. And I'm very committed to figuring this out together. We are on the other side of a process now that, again, to the legal realities, it's my understanding that no action policy-wise in terms of our policymaking authority, repealing, amending, et cetera, can occur before a year. But that does mean that we can talk about some of the more imminent questions as well as the adjustments that should be informed by a process if that's something that we deem necessary. And that's the time we have. So I really I offer all this because I think it is part of the statements that are being said. I see this as building on some work and also some new territory. And personally, I care about working through that in collaboration and with a very clear message from the voters of this community. They want to see us acting to support renters with protections now. So that's all I wanted to say. I appreciate the chance to share my thoughts too.
And Ms. Jalali, I appreciate your call to give grace. And obviously we are charting new territory. I think what I've heard several council members say is like both the blessing and the curse of the process that was chosen by the advocates is that the ordinance language has been in front of us for over a year. So this is not all that new. So to your point, I appreciate it. I second that, but I also think, you know, in Minneapolis now the work is in front of them to craft an ordinance. Here we have an ordinance that's been sitting on our table for months, and just now we're starting the work, and I think that's just a bit frustrating as we're, and especially in our role as budget on the budget. So appreciating where you're coming from, and also just the challenge that's in front of us that maybe could have been avoided. I see Mr. Tolbert's got a hand up.
Yeah, and I agree with much of what Councilmember Jalali said. I think the thing I'm getting at is we have been talking about this for a month, and we haven't even been given, is it going to cost us $5,000? Is it going to cost us $10 million? I have not even a guesstimate or a timeline of when that will happen. And I think I honestly had a, you know, a nicely done website not appeared this morning, I probably would have said, you know, it's going to take some time to kind of figure out what's going on. But obviously that work has been being done, and nobody on this council, as far as I know, has been at all involved in it, or given any insight of when the timeline will actually happen. And I think it's important because we do need to plan for our budget next year, because like it or not, we are legally obligated to pass it by December, I think 18th, or I can't recall the exact date, but we do have that legal obligation to pass an actual budget. And so getting some, you know, timeline of when a proposal will be before us, when a budget fiscal note will be before us, so that we can implement this accordingly, I think is important. And I you know, from this, it sounds like we still don't even have answers of when we'll have answers. and that's too bad, because we do need to get moving on this to implement the will of the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. And to the question earlier, we have not had the other members join the call. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. You know, I think what I'm hearing is that this ordinance brings us a lot of hope to help folks who will be struggling with rent. And that's what we want. And I think the voter has spoke to that. But at the same time, as an institution, as the capital city, I think people also look up to us for leadership. And when they look at us and we don't have our ducks in a row, our I's are not dotted, T are not crossed, and I want to use this is a change ordinance for the city. And so I think as a council, we're asking for accountability. We're asking for clarification. These are things that we do every day, try to find clarity, try to find information for our constituents. And so I think we're in our right, doing our job, trying to figure out what's going on. If we as council member are confused about what's happening, just imagine our constituents are super confused. And so I think we could do better. And the council, the administration, we could do better. You know, what we don't want is the press telling the story that we don't know what the heck we're doing, and that this ordinance passed. We've got enough time, but we don't have anything in place. We don't have money for this. And so it just looks like we're not a small nonprofit. You know, we're a big city, and we should be doing better than this for our voters, for our constituents, and for our landlords.
And I fully agree, Mr. Tao, and I also would just like to underscore that we have been asking these questions. This is not on the council's back. We would try to provide this information in advance of our vote this month. So we don't have anybody else who's joining our conversation, it appears. Are there any other questions for Ms. Goodman at this time on this update? All right, it looks like there are no further questions. It might be helpful. I know that we have, the mayor's office had said, or the mayor himself had said that maybe we could modify it and make some changes. Does anybody know what those changes that the mayor was proposing we should make are?
Council President, is that a question for me?
Yeah, do we know? I know that he had made some overtures, like it's not quite right, but we can make some adjustments. Do we know what that is?
Council President, no, not specifically, but I will say that again, the study that we have, my opinion, again, it's my opinion, is that professionals in this market will be studying our market and the concept of rent stabilization and comparing the program to others that have been implemented.
No, I heard that. I guess one of the pieces of confusion that we discussed last week was just that the mayor had made some comments that he was supportive, but there were some changes that should be made. And I think it would be helpful, and we can put this on next week's agenda to get some information so that we have some clarity around what that what that might be. Because to what we've been told, we can't make adjustments to this ordinance. So it would be helpful to know that as well. And of course, I'm not asking you to be a mind reader. Just I think that's something that would be helpful for us to know as well. And okay, so I don't see other questions for you right now. I do appreciate. I think you've heard appreciation from all council members for you being here to take these questions. I know it's a rough spot to be in, but we do have questions. And as folks said, we're trying to just do our job and get the information that we need. And as Mr. Tao said, if we're confused, I can't imagine what folks who aren't doing this stuff day in and day out are thinking right now. Ms. Prince has her hand up.
Council President Brenmon, I'm wondering on that question that you just asked about our inability to amend this, if there's any new information from the city attorney on that analysis that we did receive last week, that we will not be able to amend it.
I see Ms. Tierney turn on her camera. So Ms. Tierney.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Prince, I don't have any new information for you. We continue to do research on this. The one point that is very clear is that our charter prohibits repeal within the first year following approval of the ordinance by the voters. So the question then is what level of amendments would be allowed? And like I described last week, I think that's something that we would need to look at on a case-by-case basis and evaluate to what extent any amendment altered the ordinance to the level of being considered a repeal in some way.
And Ms. Tierney, would a repeal need to be on the ballot? Would that need to be passed by the voters?
I don't believe so. No, I think once the ordinance has been written, the council has the authority to repeal. It certainly could be repealed by the voters, but I don't believe that that would be necessary.
That's interesting. So once it needs to go before the voters for approval, but then from that point, it can be the ordinance is established and then can be modified after the year time. That's interesting. Thanks for that information and for the follow-up question. All right, we have got more ground to cover today at our council meeting, so we will move on. Thank you again for being here, Ms. Goodman. Director Goodman, we appreciate you and your responses here today. Thank you so much. All right, let us move on, Ms. Moore.
Item 14 is the final adoption of Ordinance 21-29, amending Chapter 324 of the Legislative Code in order to create separate licenses for tobacco product shops and tobacco shops to restrict pricing discounts or coupons and to create a distance requirement between establishments licensed to sell tobacco.
All right, and this is before us for final vote. We did have to lay it over last week for just hold it in its final form for 1 week before we voted. So are there any comments before we move to a roll call? Ms. Naker and then Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. I don't think I've spoken about this ordinance yet, so at our last chance here, I just wanted to say how strongly I support it, and not only for the public health reasons that I think are so obvious, but also in my mind, this is really a step forward for our young people. And I was actually thinking about this last week when we had our really motivating and inspiring youth coming forward who are going to be serving on our boards and commissions, and thinking about how we are empowering them and preparing them to lead through that program. And this is just another form of supporting our young people and preparing them to be healthy adults. And so I'm I'm really, really excited to be supporting this today.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. Ms. Yang.
Thank you. I am also really excited that today's the final vote for this. I will be supporting it, and it was really heartwarming and just joyful being able to read the letters from young people, especially who wrote about how important this change was going to be for them, and also their family, their communities, and to hear from new parents as well. I just loved it all, and I wanted to give a special shout out to Tiffany Pao Yang from the Association of Non-Smokers. As you all know, I think it was a week or about two weeks ago, she emailed us saying that she transitioned out of the association, but it was so great to see her be able to carry this to the finish line. When she and Jeannie met with me when I first came on the council, they were both there together giving me a briefing, telling me all about their work from the beginning. And so wanted to give a special shout out to her. And yeah, I'm ready to support this and pass this.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Yang. Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President Brenmon. And I just want to say again how much it means to be passing this ordinance in response to the request of such a broad coalition of the community, from young people, as Ms. Yang mentioned, to the faith community, our healthcare community, the business community. It really is a powerful coalition that came to us and asked us to provide this leadership. And I want to especially thank you, Council President Brenmon, for being the lead sponsor on this.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. Oh, Ms. Yang's got a hand back up.
Yeah, I wanted to add that it was really exciting seeing people who are outside of St. Paul, right? Wow, we wish that we had this in our city too. And so I just think it would be even more powerful to be able to see other cities adopt this as well. So I encourage those elected officials to do this for their communities too.
Great. Just like Mr. Toss said earlier, we're a leader here in St. Paul and cutting through this territory. So I will just wrap up by saying very quickly that in our attachments, there is something called Almas video, and I encourage people to take a quick moment to watch it. It's recommended by Ms. Moore, but it's a great video, and it just kind of gives you the good energy behind this vote. So take a gander at the Almas video. That's attachment in the Legistar system. And then I would also, appreciate my colleagues' support on this, particularly Ward 6, which has helped keep this plugging along. I want to give a shout out to Hua Jung Kim, who worked to get this off the ground, and to Jessica Larson Johnston, who picked it up the day she started in Ward 5 and carried it across the finish line. So a bunch of gratitude is in order to the organizations and stakeholders, and particularly the young people who stood up to demand better for their communities. So I will move approval. Any final discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is adopted. Item 15 is also the final adoption of ordinance 21-33, amending chapters 65 and 66 of the legislative code pertaining to homeless service facilities.
All right, and this item is before us for our final reading. I understand we have a couple of amendments on the system that should be brought forth today. I will say that if we pass amendments, the item will need to be laid over to sit in its final form for 1 week. I see Ms. Jalali has a hand up.
I was just raising my hand to get in line, but if others are bringing amendments too, I can wait.
Do you have amendments?
I guess I thought that council members Prince and Naker had also put amendments in Legistar. So are those still being proposed today?
Yeah, so I can call on folks to bring forward their amendment. I just didn't, if you had something ahead of that. Okay, just making sure. All right, so why don't we start with Ms. Naker?
Thanks, Council President. And first of all, just want to thank staff so much for the hard work on this. And I'm very, very supportive of the zoning change, which really allows for this critical service to happen in our city. I think it's really important to point out that right now, day shelters are not an allowable use in any part of St. Paul, and what this ordinance does is allow them and make it clear under what conditions they can operate. And I think we've seen with Freedom House in my own ward, I know with Listening House and Councilmember Prince's ward and other places, we need these kinds of services along the continuum to help people move from a position of vulnerability and being unsheltered to the permanent housing that we hope everyone eventually finds. But they need the day space along the way there in order to get that connection and build the relationships where they get to the point where they're ready to take the next step. So I'm very supportive of this. I received comments from the West 7th Fort Road Federation and from a number of other partners just asking for clarification on the conditional use permit that will be required for these facilities if they're over a certain size. And there were a couple of suggestions that I thought really were very common sense and have really, I think, been key in the Freedom House location in particular. So I wanted to bring those forward in the amendment that I think is called NACRE Amendments, maybe NACRE Amendments amended, NACRE Amendments updated. So the first one is just to require a litter and trash collection plan for the facility that should be developed and submitted. The second is to get a commitment from the operator of the facility that they will work in coordination with the neighborhood district council and law enforcement and with surrounding stakeholders and businesses to make sure that they are there as a committed and engaged community partner and willing to work together to resolve any issues that might arise. And finally, to provide an operator point of contact so that there is someone at the facility who can be contacted if there are any questions or if there's any trouble that needs to be reported, rather than calling the police or the city or some other place, which often is not effective and not what residents need. So, and what residents of the shelter need. So those are my amendments, and I would ask for your support.
And just looking at hands up, I guess I would just like to react to that and say that I appreciate you bringing that forward, and would just say that when I hear the requirements that we're adding to this for this use, I really think it's something that I would like to see applied even more universally. I don't think it would be inappropriate to ask most of the businesses operating in our city and organizations, as well as organizations that provide service, to provide a litter plan, a point of contact, et cetera. I think that organizations are responsible for what happens around their property. And so I appreciate you bringing these forward. I think it should be applied more universally as we move forward, and make these sort of course adjustments. I don't think it's inappropriate to require that organizations are responsible for what's outside of their physical plant itself. So I support that notion, and I think it should be even expanded beyond just day services. Ms. Prince, I see your hand up, and I'm wondering if you're responding to the amendment or if this is for the amendments you're bringing. For your amendment? Okay. Ms. Jalali, did you want to respond to Ms. Naker's amendment?
Briefly, yeah, just to really appreciate you, Councilwoman Naker, for working with service providers and the community to find workable language. I personally feel good supporting this language today, especially hearing from Listening House and the experiences of our experts in the space. And I also appreciate Council President Brenmoen's point that we should be careful not to single out day shelters and community institutions like this that provide an important service to vulnerable people. I think that the language we have before us today for this amendment is improved as well, because it supports those facilities in having reasonable commitments they can make that are in line with best practices they're already doing. And I just appreciate Listening House's willingness to kind of educate us on how that process has gone, given that they're working so closely. And we hope to replicate that citywide. So I appreciate just the work that's gone in, and wanted to offer that too.
Thanks. Any more comments on Ms. Naker's amendments? So what we'll do is we'll take this amendment, and if there's other amendment, we'll take it, and then Ms. Moore will codify the full ordinance after we're all done messing around here today. So, and no other if there's no other comments on Ms. Naker's updated amendments, she moves approval. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor and no one opposed. The amendment is approved.
All right. And now second amendment is by Ms. Prince. Ms. Prince.
Right. Thank you. My amendment is to specify the use of these day shelters for weather emergencies. When the National Weather Service declares a wind chill advisory, then the 10 beds that are available to be used for day purposes may be used for overnight use in those cases. The underlying ordinance allows 10 beds. And so my amendment is simply providing a wind chill emergency as an opportunity to have these day shelters open during a declared advisory for individuals referred by other overnight shelters or government agencies. And the facilities must be staffed for overnight purpose. I had heard back from Molly Jalma at Listening House that she was concerned that this was not allowing beds during the day, but I did nothing to change. I'm very aware that for day shelters, it's important that they do have beds, and I was in no way trying to limit the use of 10 beds during the day, but this provides an additional opportunity for these beds to be used for overnight use when they receive referrals and the place is staffed. I'd like to, and I did work with Molly, and she did get back to me, and she said that she could support this amendment. She was glad that she had misunderstood what my intention was, and she was supportive. So I would like to offer that amendment.
Okay, so limiting the overnight use to, or limiting the bed use for overnight purposes when this emergency.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And you did a way better job of explaining it than I just did. All right, Miss Jalali.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarifications being brought here, Councilmember Prince, to make sure that the intention is met. I actually I'm sorry to ask this question in case there are not staff here, but my question was, it's my understanding that the base ordinance prior to these amendments, so just in the ordinance we already have anyway, says that the facility can provide up to 10 beds, and then what Councilmember Prince is proposing would extend that for overnight. I guess, and I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the reason I'm asking is I'd like to understand where the 10 number comes from. And the reason is, if we are adding an amendment that specifies capacity in extreme weather conditions, and there are future facilities that can actually accommodate more than that, I would be worried about unintentionally limiting the number of people we can help on some of the roughest nights of the year. So to boil that down, I guess, is there someone who can speak to where the number 10 comes from so that we can just understand? I also want to respect that it's my understanding, passed by the Planning Commission. Service providers like Listening House have said that's workable, but so that we know what we're passing and don't unintentionally negatively impact people in the future, where does that number come from, and why is it recommended in a citywide ordinance when we might have shelters of different sizes in the future?
And I see Mr. Dermody turned his camera on, so that means he's ready to answer that question, I think. Welcome.
I'll try. Thank you, Council President, Council Member Jalali, Bill Dermody, staff with Planning and Economic Development. Good question. The number 10 comes from a desire to set some sort of reasonable limit and differentiate this from an overnight shelter, which is regulated differently in the code. The number 10 also works for Freedom House. I think they only have about 7 beds or something in that neighborhood. And so 10 worked for them. 10 was a reasonable limit. I don't know that it's a magic number, but that's where that number came from.
Thank you, Mr. Dermody. Ms. Jalali, did that answer your question? Your hand is still up. Oh.
I appreciate. Thank you so much, Bill, for being here. That is helpful to know. I think I have I'll just think to myself, but it makes me wonder, in a future where we have more space, I would not want to be in a place to have some kind of ordinance limit that means we couldn't help more people. So I guess my follow-up would be, are there other relevant codes that govern that? Like when we hit that wind chill temperature and we can kind of unlock the emergency power for overnight space, do people then in running those facilities just have to meet fire code, or what other codes have to be met to make sure we can create emergency beds for people in any sort of facility operating under that policy in the emergency order scenario?
Council President, Councilmember Jalali, I don't think I have a full answer prepared for you, but I believe that an emergency ordinance or emergency order from the mayor could be declared similar to what happened just, for COVID. I'm not sure of the details of how that would work and whether that's a practical way of going about it, but that I believe there's some route along those lines that could be employed. I don't believe our code has anything right now that allows for wind chill situations and extra shelter in additional places or greater capacities or anything along those lines. I don't believe it's in our city code right now.
So you do not, and I'm just so that I understand what you're saying, you're saying that you don't know whether there's like a relevant code that governs that capacity limit question in those emergency situations?
I believe there are emergency powers that may allow for relief and apply to those situations. I do not know those emergency powers well enough. Perhaps CAO may be able to pipe in on that. I also see Travis Bistadu. I think that may
Mr.
be
Germany, Mr. Germany, if you don't mind, I mean during COVID, we were able to put beds into the Wigington and rec
Right.
centers. We are in a declared state of emergency, we seem to have quite an unlimited list of things that we can do that wouldn't normally be allowed. I don't know. Mr. Bistadu put his camera on, so that means he's ready to answer the question, I think.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, our building official and our fire marshal have the ability to flex some of those rules in emergency situations, which, to your point, Council President Brenmo, gives us the ability to use those non-traditional spaces for emergency shelters in those emergency conditions. So we do have some wiggle room to work around those building code, fire code issues when we have those emergency type scenarios.
So, and I appreciate folks walking through this with me, but I do care about getting this right. So I just want to make sure we take the time to talk through it. If the amendment being brought says in that emergency scenario, you can only have up to 10 beds, does that override your flexibility?
Council President Brenmo, Councilmember, I don't have a good answer for you on that. I'm not exactly sure which authority ranks higher, whether it would be a zoning issue or a building code issue at that point, but we certainly could get back to you.
Okay. All right. I think without that, I don't know that I could support this amendment as written, but I do believe the intention is good and that it wants to clarify an existing reality. I don't want that unintended consequence hanging. So maybe there'll be more clarification, but based on that, that's my reaction.
And I guess I would like to speak in support of the amendment, and I appreciated the question and the background information. One thing I apologize for probably saying far too often is this is just an ordinance. And if we start with 10 to roll this out into our communities and it turns out we need to expand that number, it's 3 readings and we can do that. And I really do appreciate that we came to a number with the help of a community and our planning commission. I appreciate the clarification, and I also appreciate understanding that in a declared state of emergency that we have flexibility that expands beyond just the borders of these day shelters as well. So I will speak to that, and I also would say if things go as well as I imagine they can, I would certainly be open to expanding that number once we've had a chance to roll this out. Ms. Prince and Ms. Naker have both had hands up. Ms. Prince?
And I'll simply say to that with our recent emergency orders that the mayor was able to suspend the zoning code in certain areas. So to Travis's point of not knowing which would take precedence, I think that we saw that the zoning code was able to be set aside for certain issues under the emergency orders. And I see Luis is on here too.
Luis has his camera on. He must be ready to answer a question, I think.
Yeah, Council President, Council members, yes, I will. I'm going to join the emerging consensus here. There have been multiple executive orders throughout the pandemic that relate to relaxation of zoning regulations in the areas of, I can try to remember the land use name, but there's something related to testing, COVID testing. We have one related to zoning petitions. So we have waived zoning petitions during the pandemic, and as well as I think what Bill mentioned earlier on the zoning side. So I think there's probably sufficient authority through the EO process or declared emergency that if we needed to, that there could be some flexibility on the number of beds, for instance. But I'm not CAO, so I won't speak for them. I'm feeling somewhat confident that there's some flexibility there.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Naker and then Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. I really appreciate this conversation and your questions, Mr. Lally. And it seems like where we're arriving is that it actually doesn't really matter maybe what we put in this amendment at all, because in an extreme weather event that was declared an emergency, we would be able to supersede pretty much anything that we have in the zoning code. So I'm comfortable supporting this amendment today, in part because I know that there's a lot of desire on the part of potential day space providers to get closure on this issue and know where they'll be able to operate and how and want to move forward. So I will support this today. But I do want to say that I think I would like to ask our city attorneys and others to come back to us if it turns out that what we're hearing today is not the case, because I know many of us have been involved in these last minute, very dire conversations about cold weather is coming tonight, tomorrow night, and what do we do with the folks whose lives we literally need to save. And I would argue that it would be much, much better to be able to utilize our day space shelters that are available rather than having to crowd into Wigington or use other spaces in other neighborhoods that may or may not be as well suited to the purpose. So I wouldn't want to do anything to hamper our ability to use spaces that are best suited and available for those services.
Okay. Ms. Yang, then Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I do have a few things to say about this, because when I read the amendment, one of the things that was most problematic to me was this limit about the 10 beds. And so I'm glad that questions were asked about it today. I would like to see that limit be removed. I think that it's harmful for us to be in this place of gray right now and then later on react to it if we were in a situation like last year where the number of people who are living in homelessness is spiked, and then we have to figure out and be in a rush situation or try to figure things out. I think it's really important to be proactive. And that's exactly why I would like to see that limit be removed. I also feel for our staff who are working in these facilities, they know best what their capacity is. And that's why, they should be the ones to be able to determine how many beds they can have. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 11? And that the reason why we are having this conversation in the first place is to serve folks who are in the most vulnerable situation in their lives because they don't have a home. And so I would like to see that be removed. And Councilmember Prince, I want to know whether that would be a friendly amendment for you to strike out the limit for 10.
Can I just clarify here?
Yes.
Clarify here that I thought the 10 was from the Planning Commission. It's the underlying number that was approved by the Planning Commission. It is not what Councilmember Prince put in.
So if we want to make changes to that, does it have to go through the Planning Commission again, or is this something that we can decide here within the council?
Well, I guess I just want to clarify that this has been before us for 2 months. And now we're changing our dialogue and talking about making changes to what the Planning Commission established as the limit of beds in these day spaces. Ms. Prince is just amendment is about the overnight use in cases of emergency, but the 10 has been in front of us for quite a while. If we want to change it, we can do it here on the fly, but I just want to be clear that what we're changing is the proposal that was brought to us through the community and the planning commission till today. So they're two separate things. So it's not really a friendly amendment to Ms. Prince's amendment. It's an change to the day shelter ordinance that's in front of us. If that
Okay.
distinguishes.
Yep. That's fine. And I feel good moving forward with that still and bringing it to the council here for a vote.
All right. So we're running into some procedural snafus here. So Ms. Jalali, is your hand up to respond to Ms. Prince's amendment?
I guess it was. So the idea that I had was to offer to the amendment, a facility may provide beds for overnight use within relevant capacity limits. And I think that has the same effect without running the risk of creating a false limit. I guess the place where I feel a little mixed is that we are hearing from our staff that there's a general consensus that there's flexibility. So the purpose behind my reason for bringing up this conversation is to make sure that we are not limiting our ability to serve people. I saw that to that point, CAO had I think Ms. Tierney had waited to speak and then went away. So to me, it kind of hinges on that. And I thought maybe she was going to speak to that. Councilwoman Naker, if you know too from your knowledge and speak to that, have your hand up, that's fine. But that's the reason why I was bringing this up.
Okay, but just to clarify, there's a motion from Ms. Prince for her amendments. So if you want to amend her motion, and we don't follow strict Robert's rules, but we do need to kind of make sure that for at least for Ms. Moore's sake and folks paying attention here, that there's some structure to our decision-making process. So there's a motion from Ms. Prince. You're proposing an amendment, and I'm looking to Ms. Naker are you weighing in on the amendment?
I'm not going to simplify the conversational tree here, Council President, unfortunately, but I appreciate Councilmember Jalali's faith in me. I do not have the city attorney's answer on that question, but I would like to hear from Ms. Tierney. I was just going to ask Ms. Yang if her recommendation, if she is talking about removing the 10-bed limit period, or removing the 10-bed limit from Ms. Prince's amendment, which is about overnight use specifically. The 10-bed limit was in the original, but it was only about day use. My understanding is, and that's from the Planning Commission, Ms. Prince's amendment adds that you can use the shelter overnight as well in an emergency, but only with 10 beds. And I just want to know what Ms. Yang is proposing changing.
It would be for the overnight stay. So it would basically be striking out the part where it says up to 10 beds for overnight use. Like that number can be determined by the staff who are running the facility. And so the language that I just muted myself, Councilmember Jalali, that you brought forward, like I would support that.
All right, so
maybe Ms. Tierney has an answer.
Yeah, this is really great when some of the stuff gets handled before our meeting. Just FYI, this is really complicated and confusing. And I want to make sure that we are knowing exactly what we're passing and why. Ms. Tierney?
Council President Brenmo and council members, I just wanted to offer a little bit clarity with regard to the emergency declarations. Our ability to allow spaces to be used and waive the zoning code is contingent on a mayor declaring an emergency. When we did it last winter, we did not declare a cold weather emergency because we were relying on the pandemic itself as our emergency. And then we adopted executive orders to waive the zoning code. So this would take that two-step process of both the declaration of an emergency and then an executive order that waived whatever part of the zoning code is necessary to be waived. That is certainly within the mayor's authority, but I want to tell you, I don't ever remember the mayor declaring an emergency based on cold weather. Not that he couldn't, or a mayor couldn't, I should say, but it isn't something that's commonplace for us. And usually it takes a minute to get these things underway, and we don't always have that lens of time. It wouldn't be an automatic ability to do it because the weather reaches a certain level.
I'm only quiet because I don't even know procedurally. Ms. Prince has a motion in front of us. Sherry Moore has waving her hand.
I would suggest that perhaps you want to have asked Ms. Prince if Ms. Jalali's motion on her amendment is friendly or not. If she says it's friendly, then they would be combined. If she doesn't want to accept that motion, then you could vote on Ms. Prince's motion first and then Ms. Jalali's motion.
All right. Well, and now Mr. Tolman has his hand up. Chris, you want to weigh in on this one? I mean, I think the nice part is the intention here is to move this forward. I feel like we might be getting a little bit into the what if weeds. I just want to point that out. It's like, if this happens and then this happens, then what are we going to be able to do? And like, really what we want to do is pass this so we can have day services throughout the city. So I just want to encourage people to not get too deep into the weeds. Keep your eyes on the prize here. You know, we also can amend ordinances. Mr. Tolbert.
Maybe a suggestion, and people might reject this on its face, and I understand that, because I'm a little confused by what we're actually going to be voting on here or where it's at. And I also think what Ms. Tierney said, you know, I suspect we could probably tie it to something else that's not an emergency ordinance. We could tie it to a temperature. We could tie it to a governor's ordinance or cold weather, school closing. You know, there's a lot of different things that we could tie it to that we could be creative about if we wanted to tie it to something. But my suggestion being, it might make sense to take this, hammer it out amongst, you know, Councilmember Jalali and Councilmember Prince, I think, are most in the details on this. Not that I'm not, but just not to the extent I think that either are. We could lay this matter over for a week, since we need to anyways, and hammer out some of these amendments and get it right. I don't think there, you know, obviously we want to get this passed soon, but I don't think 1 week or 2 weeks is going to make a huge difference on this matter. And it seems like it's an important distinction that we want to ensure we have the right language on and intent on. So it's just a suggestion that we could do and help everyone fully understand exactly where we're at on this procedural posture. But happy to let people reject that, and I can vote on it, you know.
No, I do appreciate that, and I think in some ways it's echoing just like these are small things that we could have prepared before the meeting. Ms. Jalali.
I guess I'd like to take Sherry's suggestion and offer my friendly addition to what Councilmember Prince is bringing, which would then read: a facility may provide beds for overnight use within relevant capacity limits during the declared advisory.
Ms. Prince, do you take that as a friendly amendment? The other option that's been presented is to lay over.
I think I would like to lay it over. My concern is that this is a day shelter ordinance. And what we're doing here is allowing an exception for this to be used as an overnight facility. And it would be part of our referral system. It wouldn't be people, I mean, one of the main ideas of making it part of our referral program is that people wouldn't be trying to get to a place and then find out that it's already full. The point of this was to reflect that there are beds during the day, so those beds could be used at night in weather emergencies. So I think I would appreciate Councilmember Tolbert's suggestion that we lay this over.
All right, so Ms. Prince is not taking that as a friendly amendment.
I mean, I definitely would like to think about it, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about it, and what is meant by capacity and how, and I'd like to talk to our staff about, you know, how it reflects to that, the day shelter portion of this. I mean, these are not places that are set up for overnight shelters. They're set up as day shelters. And my concern here is that that we try to be very clear about what we're offering here, because we've seen with Listening House and Freedom House that really strict clarity is very helpful. And that's one of the reasons I appreciated and voted for Councilmember Naker's amendments, is that those were all provisions that we had tried to build into the Listening House final agreement with the Planning Commission that went really, that did not go well. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to work those provisions into this ordinance, because they are critically important. But I think clarity is what we need here, and an open-ended, according to whoever thinks the capacity is the capacity. I think that is a slippery slope that we should really try to define better.
So just to clarify then, Ms. Prince is requesting a 1-week layover to get the language right, to work with Ms. Yang, Mr. Lally on the proposed amendment that removes the language about the limited number of beds, or even perhaps what is an emergency. So what is before us right now is a request for a 1-week layover, so that we don't have to do this right here during the meeting. Ms. Jalali and Ms. Naker, this editing during the meeting. Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Naker have hands up on that motion.
I am willing to take time. I don't like that we are laying it over simply because I wanted to resolve this before the meeting today and address this. I am concerned that the amendment as written by Councilmember Prince actually goes too clear in the other direction, especially hearing what the city attorney just said, that it would make it so that the only time you can provide overnight shelter is during one type of nationally declared situation, and then that it would give a number of how much additional you can. So I wanted to pass this today. I didn't bring this amendment, and I did expect that amendments were talked about with the relevant department staff. I believe the intention is good. I understand that we are trying to make sure these facilities work for everyone and make sure this resource comes online. If this amendment is voted on today, I would vote no, simply because I want to better understand those consequences. If we're doing a layover, I can certainly support a layover, but I want to respect that my intention is to pass this. I think everyone wants to pass this. So, Councilwoman Naker, if you want to speak to that too, I welcome that.
The motion right now is for a 1-week layover. That it actually is has precedence over other amending and amendments. So I just want to make sure that we keep our conversation around what that proposal is. And Ms. Naker has had her hand up.
Thanks, Council President. If I may, I just want to clarify what I think this has gotten very complicated, and to me, it's actually pretty straightforward, which is that what Councilmember Prince has introduced with her amendment, I think, is spot on. We should allow day spaces to serve people overnight in an emergency. There's also a 10-bed limit that is in Councilmember Prince's overnight emergency amendment. And the question is, in an emergency, do we want to limit ourselves to 10 beds or not? I think to me, it's pretty clear that in an emergency situation, we wouldn't want to limit ourselves to 10 beds. That doesn't make it an overnight shelter. This amendment clearly is only talking about emergencies. It's just in that one situation where we're desperate for places for people, should we cut ourselves off at some arbitrary number or not? So to me, it is pretty straightforward. I would be happy to vote on this today. If we do want to lay it over, we can, but I know sometimes that is also a lot of work, and we have a lot of things to do. So I wanted to share those thoughts.
Ms. Jalali, could you restate your motion?
Let's just vote on your amendment. Let's just do it. We don't need to lay it over. Let's just do it.
Well, what is your amendment again?
If your amendment passed, my amendment would simply say, a facility may provide beds for overnight use within relevant capacity limits during the declared advisory. It's only for the overnight scenario.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion and accept it as a friendly amendment. I can count, I think. So I am concerned about think we should pass it today.
All right.
All right.
So I'll accept it as a friendly amendment, which takes care of our having to vote
Appreciate
Well,
that.
we-
Thank you.
on the
Yeah, we do
amendment
still
the
have to
amendment.
vote.
But no,
Yeah.
on the amendment, I realize, but we don't have to. But I will say, Councilmember Jalali, that I definitely have been working on this with staff, with the city attorney, with Luis, with Molly for the last 2 weeks. So to suggest that this has not been vetted, and I thought I had your support about 2 hours ago. So anyway, but I will accept that as a friendly amendment and move my amendment.
All right. So Ms. Prince is moving her modified amendment. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, roll call.
Excuse me, Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The amended amendment is approved.
I'm just thinking about the juxtaposition between the conversation we had about rent stabilization and what we just went through here. It's interesting. So let's go on to item 16.
And I will just note that the ordinance is now laid over to November 10th for final adoption.
Unless we amend it again.
Item 16 is final adoption of ordinance 21-38, amending section 94.13 of the legislative code to ensure consistency with the 2015 Minnesota plumbing and building codes.
And this item is before us for final approval. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Tolbert moves approval. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is adopted. Item 17 is first reading of ordinance 21-42, amending section 220.05 of the legislative code to set rates for base level garbage service to be effective January 1st, 2022.
And this is the first reading of this ordinance. And so Susan Young has been patiently waiting. We will have a staff report. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for allowing me to attend. Jerry, it says that I cannot.
Right. At this point, we can't really hear you that well either. Oop.
Okay, is that a little bit better?
Yep,
Yeah,
that
I
sounds
just need
better.
to promote her to presenter.
Oh, we're going to switch your role on the Teams meeting. You should be able to present now.
Okay, and can you all see my screen, please? There. Can you all see my screen, please?
Yep.
The proposed garbage rates? Okay. All right. As you all remember, the City of St. Paul began our citywide coordinated collection several years ago, and all properties of 1 to 4 dwelling units are required to have our service. You all set the rates for garbage service through City Council action, and residents pay haulers directly for that service. Paying for the garbage service to the haulers is different than the rates that the residents pay on their property taxes for the administration of the garbage program. Today, what I'm asking is that you approve the ordinance, or for the first reading, setting the garbage fees billed by the haulers for next year, January 1st, 22 through December 31st, 22. The services that are included, we have the 4 service levels, the small every other week cart, the small cart that is handled weekly, the medium cart, and the large 96-gallon cart. Just to remind you, walk-up service is available for less able-bodied residents, and we do allow service holds for snowbirds or other purposes. And we do have an unoccupied unit and vacant building service hold. And I really want to remind folks that as part of your garbage service, there is a bulky item collection. Small carts, either weekly or every other week, 2 items per household per calendar year. Large, medium and large carts, 3 items per household per calendar year. And this is at no additional charge. If you have 4, 5, 6, 12, 14 items, you can call your hauler and they will be added to your bill. You can have collection at your cart. There are some additional fees if there's an extra bag of garbage. The voluntary yard waste subscription. If you don't have a yard waste subscription, but you want a yard waste bag, you're putting out a few bags because the leaves just fell and you're getting them off your lawn. Again, the bulky items above the 2 or 3 items per year do have an additional charge. Walk-up service, if you are able to take your cart, but you just desire not to, there is a fee for walk-up service. The other fees are listed on here. These fees are not changing. Staff is not recommending any change to those fees. The way that we talk about the yearly change in the garbage collection costs that the haulers bill is there are separate portions of the bill that are taken care of as part of the negotiation process. The fuel portion of the bill, there is no change in that. As long as the fuel cost averages less than or equal to $3.50 per gallon of diesel over the course of the year, there is no change to the fuel portion of the cost. The non-fuel portion, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, has a maximum 3% increase. When garbage tonnage goes up, haulers have more that they have to pay for to dispose of. Therefore, if the tonnage increases, there is an increase to the fee that the haulers will charge. And the disposal rate per ton at the recycling and energy facility is a cost, again, that the haulers do have to bear. And so when there is an increase projected there, that increase is part of the increase that staff recommends to the amount the haulers can charge. In 2022, the Recycling and Energy Board will be increasing the tipping fee by $3 per ton. On the billing, there is no change to what the, I'm sorry. Okay, on terms of billing, there is no change to the amount that the haulers will be charging residents for the billing and customer service. There is no change to the bulky item collection prices. And again, with respect to disposal, there is going to be a $3 per ton increase in 2022. We have had a slight increase in the number of active accounts, which spreads the tonnage over a slightly different population. And there was an increase in the number of tons that St. Paul residents disposed of in 2021, which affects our 2022 price. The rates that we are proposing for 2022, I heard very, very loud and clear from the council members and from residents that folks that are working very hard to reduce the amount of garbage that they're generating should pay a smaller amount. So what we are proposing is that the smallest every other week cart increase by 7 cents per quarter or 28 cents per year, that a small weekly cart increase by 77 cents per quarter, which is just a little over a 1% increase, that the medium cart, which has more garbage, more tonnage, increase by $1.69 per quarter, and that the largest garbage cart, the 95-gallon carts, have the largest change because they will have the largest tonnage, and that increase be $5.58 per quarter. Therefore, on the total changes of our rates, we are looking for a total increase citywide of all of the garbage and all of the rates of $682,000, $682,778.52, spread over all of our 1 to 4 unit residences. But again, the smallest every other week cart will have the smallest change. The small cart the next smallest, medium, and large. I do need to apologize to you all. I do realize that 7 cents per quarter is 28 cents per year, and 77 cents per quarter is $3.10 per year, and so on. There is a 1 cent error in this final chart, and I apologize to the council. And I will stand for questions.
Are there questions? Ms. Naker?
Thanks, Council President. I just wanted to thank you and your team for the hard work on this. And I especially want to call out and appreciate how the rates we've heard this from constituents often, that there should be some sort of incentive structure built in for throwing away less trash and reducing your total waste. And this does that by increasing the annual change is higher for larger carts and lower for smaller carts. And so I think that that more equitable way of doing things really provides the kind of incentives we want. And I also want to acknowledge and appreciate that we're asking for community involvement as we start to prepare for the next round of negotiating a new contract. And I know that I think you just sent today the names of the folks who have been nominated for that committee. I know there are many people who've expressed a lot of concern, a lot of questions, a lot of suggestions for how we do this better next time around. And I appreciate that we're letting people get involved in that process.
Council President, Councilmember Naker, that is the ad hoc garbage advisory group. I will be seeking a resolution from the council in a week or two. But I did want to let you all know who was applying for that. We had 59 people total from across the city that applied to be on that group.
That's great. And you said 59 people applied?
59 people applied, and I am moving 18 forward just because it is challenging to handle a very, very large group. But as you'll see in the letter that I sent to you, I looked for diversity across the wards. I looked for diversity in income, diversity in whether folks were property owners or whether they were renters, 1 to 4 unit properties, diversity in demographics, age, as much as I could find across the 59 applicants.
That's great. Thank you. Are there other questions? I know we have big work in front of us in terms of what's next for garbage, so I appreciate that and the committee update. Ms. Prince.
I too am so grateful to Susan Young for her work on all of this. And Susan, in a somewhat unrelated but related question, can you give us any update on the blue bag composting program and when we can expect that to start? I had been thinking that we were looking into 2022 for a start time, but has that again been moved back?
Council President and Councilmember Prince, the Ramsey and Washington counties purchased the Newport Waste to Energy facility, that our refuse dry fuel facility in Newport. And as they have worked through their purchase and that they're making their plans, they are making extensive revisions to that property. It will result in 2023 in quite a large increase in the tipping fee there. But one of the changes that they're making is to pull out what are called durable compostable bags. Blue bag is something that was done over in Delano, and it is a copyrighted, but the durable compostable bags will be free to all residents in Washington and Ramsey County, and residents will put food waste, compostable items, tissues, paper towels, pizza boxes, the infamous pizza boxes, into these durable compostable bags. That durable compostable bag will go into the garbage cart. When the haulers will collect the cart, just like normal, the trucks will be tipped at Newport, and the durable compostable bags will be pulled out for a form of composting. And I don't believe that they have finalized exactly whether that will be a straight commercial composting or anaerobic digestion or another method. That to pull those bags out is taking a very large construction project. They hope to be piloting and beginning that collection of the durable compostable bags the end of 22. But I don't believe that we'll, in St. Paul, we'll be looking at it until the very, very end of 22 or the beginning of 23. I think we all understand that construction doesn't always go as quickly as we'd like, and delivery of large pieces of equipment is sometimes not as quick as we would like.
And Ms. Young, did you also happen to mention there that we will be seeing a large increase in the tipping fee as a result of the construction project?
That will occur in 23 when the Ramsey Washington Energy Board needs to begin to pay back the bonds that they will be using to construct the equipment.
Thanks for that warning.
I don't like being surprised, ma'am, and I don't imagine that you all do either.
Thank you, Susan.
Oh, fun day. Okay, so let's see. This is a great report, great heads up. Lots of I'm just really pleased that there's so much interest in participating in that conversation too. Any other comments before we lay this matter over for public hearing? All right, looks like there's nothing else. Thank you again, Ms. Young, for hanging out with us to do your report. We appreciate your patience. And we will lay that item over on 1 week for public hearing.
Thank you.
Item 18 is first reading of ordinance 21-45, amending chapter 64 of the administrative code to update deferral language, delete sewer separation references, and update assessment procedures.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. And this is actually on, I think, the next 5 items. And I will be giving the councilperson staff report today on these items. So I think I've had a chance to speak to all of you about these in advance. But as just to be clear on the record, the goal of all of these amendments is really to ease the financial burden on some of our lowest income residents who might have difficulty paying them. We have a state statute that allows for a city to defer assessments if there is a hardship, and state statute clarifies that people over 65 or who are retired because of a permanent disability or active members of the military for whom payment would be a financial hardship can defer their assessment. And cities are able to decide which assessments can be deferred. So we currently allow deferrals for some types of work. And as we all know, we do many types of street work and work on trees and other public works that then residents get assessed for. And often those are unpredictable. Residents don't know to expect them, and they can often be expensive. So I received an email from a constituent about this, asking if she could defer an assessment. And it was at that point that I found out that while we do allow deferrals for some kinds of work, we don't for many others. And it was unclear as my staff and I dug into the kinds of assessments that allow deferrals, why those allowed deferrals and why not others. Certainly seemed to me that any assessment that was not due to the fault of the property owner, that was work that we just chose to do on your street or on your trees at that time, should be eligible for deferral if you meet the hardship qualifications. So that's what these amendments do. They expand the number of assessments eligible for hardship deferral, and the new assessments which would be added that would now be eligible would be mill and overlay, seal coating, property services costs that are in Chapter 60 that are not the fault of the owner, and removal of diseased or dangerous trees on private property, which include trees infested by emerald ash borer and other dangerous conditions. So for any of those services, in addition to the assessments we already allow deferral for, those who are seniors, who are retired because of a permanent disability, or who are active military members for whom payment would be a hardship could now apply to have that assessment deferred. The cost to this real estate estimates would be about $60,000 a year. So that seems to me like a reasonable cost to make this easier for our residents. And again, the overall goal is just to simplify our policies. As you can see, the fact that it took 5 different amendments to make this happen shows how complex they are, to make sure that we're consistent in how we're allowing people to defer, and then ultimately just to make things easier for our low-income seniors and our service members and those with disabilities. And I think this would always be important, but during the pandemic, when we've seen so many people struggling in so many ways, this seems particularly important. So that's my council member staff report. and I'm happy to take questions. And I hope I can earn your support.
Thank you for your council member staff report. Are there questions? I mean, and again, this is for the following 5 or 6. Yeah, 6 ordinances that are in front of us. So these, we will read through them individually, but all of them will be needed to be laid over for public hearing. But are there any questions for our council member report? All right. Then we'll lay, I don't know how you want to do this, Sherry, just lay it over.
Yeah, we can just lay it over, and then when I read the others, I'll just add the layover language right away,
Okay,
as we
thank you.
used to in the past. And Council President, just so you know, your video is frozen.
Okay.
Not for me.
Oh, okay. It was for me, but
Hopefully it was while I was making a very strange face, as is often the case. Okay, am I good?
yes. Okay, so item 18 is laid over for second reading public hearing to October 10th. Item 19 is first reading of ordinance 21-46, amending chapter 60 of the administrative code to clarify hardship deferral language. This ordinance is laid over to October 10th for second reading, or I'm sorry, November 10th for second reading public hearing. All those are, it's the last month. Item 20 is first reading of ordinance 21-47, amending chapter 177, removal of dangerous trees of the legislative code by deleting it in its entirety and combining the provisions into chapter 175 of the legislative code. And this ordinance is laid over to November 10th for second reading public hearing. Item 21 is first reading of ordinance 21-48, amending chapter 175 of the legislative code, emerald ash borer pest insect, by deleting in its entirety and combining the provisions into chapters 175 of the legislative code. And this ordinance is laid over to November 10th for second reading public hearing. And item 22 is first reading of ordinance 21-49, amending chapter 62 of the administrative code to clarify hardship deferral language and other language clarification. And this ordinance is laid over to November 10th for second reading public hearing. And item 23 is first reading of ordinance 21-50, amending chapter 175 of the legislative code in order to combine 3 chapters regarding the abatement of dangerous or diseased trees into 1 chapter and to clarify hardship deferral language. And this ordinance is also laid over to November 10th for second reading public hearing. Item 24 is ordinance 21-41, amending the commercial development district known as the Schmidt Brewery Commercial Development District to remove liquor license restrictions, and this is the public hearing.
All right, so this ordinance has ordinance public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Naker would move to close the public hearing and lay the matter over for 1 week. Any discussion on that motion? Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince, Councilmember Prince, Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over to November 10th for final adoption. Item 25 is the public hearing of ordinance 21-44, granting a 5-year extension of the Energy Park Utility Company franchise held by the Port Authority from August 1st, 2036 to August 1st, 2041.
All right, and this public hearing has been held virtually. As such, I would move to close the public hearing and lay the matter over for 1 week. Any discussion? Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over to November 10th for final adoption. Item 26 is resolution public hearing 21-282, establishing the water charges for 2022.
All right, we discussed this in our meeting today too. We'll begin to see these items come before us to be laid over to vote with for our final budget adoption. So this public hearing really has been held at the St. Paul Regional Water Services, but Ms. Yang would move to close the public hearing and lay the matter over till December 8th. Any discussion? Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is laid over to December 8th for final adoption. Item 27 is resolution public hearing 21-297, setting the 2022 sanitary sewer and storm sewer rates.
All right, and again, this item will be coming before us to vote on for our final budget. Mr. Tolbert would move to close the public hearing and lay the matter over till December 8th. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is laid over to December 8th for final adoption. Item 28 is resolution public hearing 21-298, authorizing a business subsidy for the OMG studios.
All right, and I believe Annie Burns is here to report on this agenda item. Hopefully. Thank you
Yes.
for your patience.
Yes. No, hello. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, this is a Neighborhood Star Award for a $100,000 loan and $100,000 grant. So this was approved by you back in August, and it just reaches the threshold for the public hearing. No comments were given. So unless there's any other discussion or questions, I see. So yeah, I'm here to answer any questions, but otherwise I'll turn it over.
Ms. Just on that point, when I haven't seen a Neighborhood Star item come through on this way. You said it met a threshold. Can you just tell us what that threshold is?
Yeah, there's the $50,000 threshold. To be honest, I was told I needed to do the public hearing. I'm not exactly sure what triggers it. So I believe it's 50,000, but I feel like I'd want to confirm that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jalali?
Thanks. If others have questions, happy to have those answered. I just wanted to share some context too on the business in question. OMG Studios is a communications firm that does a range of youth and community programming. The specific nature of the business is a woman of color owned local Twin Cities leader who has worked with a whole range of different community organizations to share more about the work that they do. They also have plans to create a youth recording studio to sort of teach the skills of communications to young people in our community. I believe that they have relocated to the Lake Monster kind of business strip over there near SPNN in Ward 4. And they're also situated in the Creative Enterprise Zone, which is as many folks know, a arts and nonprofit and community space type of neighborhood and kind of local sub-economy there. So it's my understanding they went through the Neighborhood Star process and then are coming forward for this loan, and it's part of their kind of finding a home in St. Paul. So that's the context I have as a council office where this business is located.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. I see Ms. Naker has a question, so I will go to her. But I just want to say that I fully support OMG. I know they're a great organization, but this is really confusing to me and perplexing how it's coming in. So I may have some might need to understand procedurally what's going on, and not in any way lacking support for the work of OMG. So Ms. Dinker, did you have some specific questions?
Thanks, Council President. Ditto. I couldn't support the project more. I don't know about this threshold. I think I've seen neighborhood star projects that have been above that before that we've just approved with neighborhood star. And I also wasn't totally clear when I saw the term business subsidy. We've had so much conversation about our many business assistance programs that for a second I thought this was like a whole new business assistance program that we'd never heard of. So I guess I would appreciate some follow-up. I'm happy to support this today, but to understand why this is coming in separately.
Yeah, is Ms. Jalali, it is neighborhood star?
Yeah, I'm seeing neighborhood star. That's what it says in Legistar.
Okay. Would you be open to just a 1 week layover on this item just to get some clarification? It sounds like our staff member had some questions herself. And I just, unless it's stops them from moving forward in a timely manner, for some reason mine, I don't even have an attachment in my Legistar, but it could have been, you don't either? No, yeah, I don't have an attachment, so I can't even see what we're looking at. And mostly, I think I want to make sure that this is put it in the right way because I'm on board. So would that be acceptable, just a 1 week to just get some clarification, or would that the wheels fall off of this project if we did that?
I'm open to that if Annie can confirm that there isn't any kind of actual other deadline that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, that should be fine. I know they're waiting to sign their lease to get this contract executed, but I don't think a week will cause a big delay.
Okay, and maybe that it's a week with the message that there's seemingly a lot of support here on the council, but just procedurally, this is very unusual. Even just the title is unusual. So I want to make sure that we're doing this right so that we don't end up having a problem on the back end. So really just mostly getting our ducks in a row so that we don't have problems in the back end. So if we can deliver that message to Lee and others that are part of that great organization, I think that would be great. But support is here, but some procedural questions are out there. So there's a motion for a 1 week layover. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
And is the public hearing closed?
We'll close the public hearing and lay the matter over for 1 week. Thank you.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Council President Brenmon?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is laid over 1 week to November 10th. Item 29 is resolution public hearing 21-304, approving the application of 594 Market LLC TJL Development for a sound level variance for the installation of a soil retention system in preparation for a new apartment building construction project at 594 Selby Avenue, work to be done from November 11th to the 5th.
All right. This public hearing has been held virtually. So as such, Mr. Tao would move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Council President Brenmon?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 30 is resolution public hearing 21-309, authorizing Public Works to request $893,166 in SCORE grant and incentive funds from Ramsey County to support the curbside recycling program and setting the 2022 city recycling service fees.
And this public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Prince would move to close the public hearing and lay the matter over till December 8th. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Council President Brenmon?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is laid over to December 8th. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 32, RLH FCO 21-150, 1040 Margaret Street, and item 34, RLH BBR 21-68, 243 Winifred Street East. And the motion is to adopt these items.
So moved by Ms. Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following item, no objection to the legislative hearing officer's amended recommendation was received, and therefore she recommends amendment and adoption of item 31, RLH RR 21-59, 830 Eigelhart Avenue, and the motion is to amend and adopt.
So moved by Mr. Tao. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted as amended. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. Item 33, RLH RR 21-41, 864 Marion Street, and we have a staff report.
Welcome, Ms. Mormond.
Council President Brenmon, council members, what we're looking at today is a follow-up on an order to remove or repair 864 Marion Street. I can quickly share my screen, and this is an image of the building that was taken in 2019. 2019 is when the file was originally opened. At which point the Department of Safety and Inspections asked the council to consider an order to remove or repair. I worked with the owner of the property through August of 2020, so for full 8-9 months, for him to be able to develop a plan and financing to rehabilitate the structure. The rehabilitation was not completed within the time granted by the council. So when the follow-up happened originally, February 23rd of 2021, we learned from the building official that only 20% of the work had been completed. Normally, when only 20% of the work has been completed, we're looking quite seriously at removal of the building for lack of progress, and at the very least of asking for an additional $5,000 to be deposited, or complete forfeiture of the 5 that's in existence and posting an additional 10. So there are financial consequences with the performance deposit for non-performance. In this particular case, my recommendation to the council was you need a fresh work plan and financing. The first one clearly didn't pan out. The work was not done according to plan. Additionally, I asked the council to continue the existing $5,000 performance deposit and require an additional $5,000 to be posted. We are now another 6 months down the road since the council granted another 180 days for the work to be completed, and the report from both the owner and the building official is that we continue to be at 20% completion of this project. As I indicated, you normally would be looking at removal of the property at this point, or dealing with the performance deposit in strong terms. My recommendation at this point is that the council get a new plan and see evidence of the ability to continue to finance this. I do have a new plan from a new investor participant and evidence of financing to complete the work. The council also has a $10,000 performance deposit in place, but a lack of progress that belies the term performance deposit for lack of performance. So I'm recommending that the council forfeit 5,000 of the 10 and require the replacement of that money so that there is a financial consequence. The 10,000 that would be remaining would be returnable to the owner upon completion of the project, but he would come out $5,000 behind. Mr. Robert Schilling, the owner, is on the line, as is the case with this type of resolution. And he would like to ask the council to show grace and not forfeit part of his performance deposit at this juncture. So I can leave it to him to testify on that if you don't have any additional questions for me at this time.
Are there questions for Ms. Mormond? All right, it looks like there are no questions, so we can hear from the property owner and his representative. Welcome.
Hello. Yes. Yeah, this is Robert Schilling, and I would request that the additional security bond be waived. During the past period of a lot of time, I've had some heart problems, two heart surgeries, a cancer surgery, bleeding event from a blood thinner that ended up in a hospital stay and a couple of pints of blood. Those things are behind me now, and I want to. Fortunately, the VA is reasonable in their rates, so I wouldn't hurt too badly financially on the surgeries. But I've got my retirement. I'm going to be 81 next month, living on Social Security with little other income, and that's been jeopardized by COVID. I've got a tenant, two tenants in a duplex, the only duplex that I have. That's rental property, where they haven't paid the rent, but I've had to continue with the mortgage. An additional $5,000 at this point would be quite of a hardship, and the delays in getting the project finished have been pretty much beyond my control. So I would ask that you could waive that additional money. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Mr. Tao, would you like to close the public hearing?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Tao moves to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brennan Moen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed.
Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. I want to thank Ms. Mormon on this item. We have spoken extensively on the situation, and you know, I'll go with Ms. Mormon's recommendation, but really I want the property owner to know that this is an area and this is a property that requires focus, energy, and be real intentional, and that his words as good as with his action. And so we'll give him this one last time to take care of this property, because this is a isolated area up in the north end that really doesn't need all property owners to all hands on deck to really clean up that area. So that's my comment.
All right, so Mr. Tao moves the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. And just a side note, undoubtedly Ms. Mormon has mentioned this to the landlord and building owner, but there are rent funds available for tenants and landlords. And so if you are owed back rent because your tenants aren't paying rent, there are resources for that as well, and we don't want you to miss that opportunity and have it be a barrier for you moving forward with this project. As Mr. Tao said, it's an important part of our community that needs building owners to keep their buildings in even better or in better shape than they are right now. So I support the motion of Mr. Tao and encourage the property owner to look into some of the rent subsidies that are out there to help get us through the COVID crisis. Any other? Ms. Mormon has her hand up.
Council President, Councilmember Tao, the resolution right now reads that the council would grant the time on the condition that the performance deposit is posted by Tuesday of next week. In the event that the council went with my recommendation, I would ask that the council do a 1 week layover to allow for the posting of that performance deposit, so you know when you take your vote whether or not that has occurred.
All right. So Mr. Tao would move that recommendation as stated by Ms. Mormond.
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to November 10th.
All right. And that brings us to the end of our agenda today. And I do not believe we have more items to come before us. So, nope. All right. So we will be adjourned. Thanks, everybody.